What's up? It's Matt. We are back with another restaurant expert roundup. Today we have in the house a chef and an author, Shawn Bucher. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Matt.
You're welcome. So introduce everybody to who you are. I see you've got the ABQ there on the shirt. Tell us who you are, what you do, and then talk about the book a little, and then we'll dig into my questions from the book.
Okay, great. Well, I go by Chef Shawn Bucher. I am a chef, an author. I've been an educator, leader, and operator. I've worked in the restaurant industry, food service industry, I should say, for the better part of about 25 years. I started my career actually in arenas and then moved into hotels, restaurants, spent a long time in healthcare. And, with the book became kind of an extension of what I was teaching everybody. So when I was going into places, because I worked as a chef instructor for a while, and that led into consulting. And when I would go and I would meet with different clients, a lot of times I was telling them the exact same thing over and over again. And so it was like, man, I got to just write this down. And so the book is kind of a culmination of my experience in restaurants and hotels and grocery stores and hospitals and different healthcare outlets, food trucks, just kind of everything that I've worked in. I noticed that there was a similar kind of line of thinking. There was a lot of the same challenges, regardless of what segment of the industry you were in. Everybody struggled with a lot of the same things, and so the book kind of came from my management philosophy, or my management formula, if you will, and that is, standards plus accountability times consistency equals success. And I'm sure we'll dive more into that, but around that philosophy is really the genesis of the book and how that came to be.
Cool. I love it. And that's what's funny about it. You go around and I'm a coach as well. I've coached a lot of businesses. And a lot of times when I've made videos, people are like, man, what made you make that video? I'm like, because I told 30 people the same thing over and over and over. And it's like, okay, I'm going to make a video and I can email it out. So one thing that I really liked that caught my attention, the first time I've gotten a book, and it had a folder and it had some worksheets. So I love the fact that I have this, and that restaurant people can literally read the book, take some notes, put some things in place. Because a lot of times we read books and it's great in theory, but then we get done with like, oh, what do I do?
Well, and at the end of the day, everyone learns differently too. There's auditory learners. There's people that learn from just getting in and doing it, being hands-on. There's, the people that have to see it visually to really, get the concept. And so I've tried to hit all aspects of that. I've done workshops with the book. I've given it out at speeches that I've given in different environments. And, a lot of times people dive into it and they might get something out of it, a little bit of something. But the idea is to really, the book is very short, but there's a lot of lessons in it. It's short because we're food service. We don't have the attention span nor the time to spend a whole bunch of hours working through a textbook. We need something that's short and concise. We need something that's going to get straight to the point, because that's how most of us work. Just tell me what I need to do and I'll get it done. I don't need 100 stories behind it. And so I've tried to make it as concise as possible. I've tried to make it really short, sweet, to the point, but pack a lot of information in there. And the worksheets are really to help you get the most out of it. So anyone who does dive into it really personalizes it for them and their operations, and really makes it what they need it to be.
No, I like it. It stood out also. It's the first time I get usually 2 or 3 books a week in the mail. Some of them I read, some of them are for interviews that I dig into. Some of them are for friends, because I have a lot of, we have a couple hundred restaurant clients, and I like to get books I think would resonate with their journey. One on here that I think is great, if you haven't read it yet, a lot of restaurants don't have, is Vivid Vision by Cameron Harold. It's on creating your vision. Where are you going in a couple years? But first point that caught my attention, which I thought was ironic, is that the first page in here, one of the first things I read was talking about leadership. And I wrote down the word lead because I've got a sheet of paper every day that I schedule my day. This is my schedule, my company's cash flow, my different things, my to-do list. But the first thing on here is lead, because I think as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, we forget that we need to be leading people within our organization. So talk about some of the things you experienced with leading and what you talk about in the book with leading your employees.
Well, definitely leadership. There's a difference between leadership and management. And I dive into that a little bit in the book. I think you start out as managing a lot of times. You start out kind of behind the eight ball and being much more reactionary than proactive. And, the goal is to really get out in front of issues before they happen. You want to make sure as a leader, as somebody who's going to be an example and that people are going to come to for answers and direction, you kind of have to have your stuff together. Like you've got to know what your vision is. You've got to know, the direction that you're going and the challenges that exist so that you can then lead people through that. And I think managers a lot of times prefer to show up and wait for what is going to happen to them versus trying to get out in front of what could possibly happen. I've always been the type that's been more proactive than reactive. I would rather address a problem or address the steps that are going to lead up to a problem than try to have that problem all of a sudden come on top of me and overwhelm me in the moment. And, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned when it comes to leadership is, and being proactive, is the concept of being a servant leader, which is not unique to me or to the book. There's a lot of people that talk about that. Ken Blanchard talks about that in his books. But I think the concept of a servant leader is particularly poignant for food service people, because most of the time when you work in food service, you're not sitting in an office or a desk. You are part of the action. To make your margins and to really run a smooth operation, you have to be part of the team. You have to get in there and get your hands dirty, so to speak. And so being a servant leader doesn't necessarily mean that you jump in and you take over people's jobs and and that's how you serve them. What I found in my experience was more just letting the team guide you, letting the team let you know what they need. So if it's a busy Friday night and the line is just jamming, but they're getting food out, sometimes our natural inclination is to jump into the busiest spot on the line and just take over. But the reality is we might not be the right person for that spot. I've had instances where I jump on a line and the first thing that I say is, what can I do? And I think taking that mentality of serving the team that's there and becoming secondary, so to speak, really helps endear the team to you, because they know that you're there to help. You're not there to criticize or condemn, or you're not taking over. You're not making them feel inferior. You're jumping in to help. You're there to do whatever it takes, whether that's bussing dishes or taking out trash or running to the walk-in for whatever people are out of. I think having that servant leadership mentality really makes all the difference, because not only does it endear your employees to you, but it also gives you the tools that you need to be successful, because the team is going to be able to act without you there more readily than if they're sitting around waiting for you to tell them what to do all the time.
It's almost like you read my notes, because literally the next thing is in the book on page 10, actually page 8 it started, but on page 9 it's got on here, I realized that I can empower people I worked with to take on additional responsibilities so that I can in turn have more time to be an effective manager. I think so, literally, like you set that up perfect, but I think it's a lot of times entrepreneurs and people, especially people who in the restaurant business, the restaurant was their baby. They handcrafted it. They started it. It built from a garage, a food truck, a small place to a giant restaurant, and they want to have their hands everything. At some point, you've got to trust. Like you said in here, somebody walked up and said, "Chef, you want me to close up?" And you said in there, it hadn't even crossed your mind, like you hadn't done that, and like you're like, you know what, you've got the keys. Have fun with it.
Well, and to be honest with you, I'm in that boat right now. We just opened this concept, ABQ Burrito, 7 weeks ago now. And I literally built this with my hands because we're in the middle of the pandemic. I couldn't find contractors. I was fortunate enough to have some past woodworking experience and construction experience. And so I did most of this by hand. built our tables. I took down walls. I, helped install our sinks and dish machines. And, so there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears literally in this building for me. So, a lot of people look at that and say, well, then it's going to be really hard to step back. It's going to be really difficult for you to kind of relinquish some of the control. But the reality is, what makes me more of an effective leader and manager is the best person to go out and market my business is me. And if I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be the face of a brand, then I need to go out there and be the face of the brand. I can't be holding hands and babysitting all the time. I have to create systems and standards that people can follow. I've got to communicate those effectively to where they understand what I'm saying, so that, it can run consistently. It's got to be consistent. People have to be able to come in and get the product that they love consistently, or they won't come back consistently. So I've done everything in my power to kind of set my team up for success. And that's why at 1:15 on a Wednesday, when we're still cranking for lunch, I can be over here talking to you.
Yeah, and that's important. And that's, again, we're on the same page. My daily sheet, I have 3 things. I have the initials at top: LMS, lead, market, and sell. Because I realized, as me as a small CEO, as you're a small CEO of your business, a lot of times we don't lead enough, which doesn't empower our people, and we have to have our hands on everything. We don't market enough. I think that's the biggest weaknesses by most restaurant operators, is that they're stuck in a kitchen versus out shaking hands, kissing babies, getting people to come in. And then we don't sell enough. A lot of our employees, and even myself, we don't sell enough. We don't sell ourselves. I interviewed a gentleman last week, and he talked about how he was working the drive-through. Another author, TJ Schreier, his book, and we were talking about it, and he said, we were talking about catering. And he's like, I was in the drive-through. I saw the person's shirt. I asked a question because they worked at the hospital. Next thing I know, we're catering a 100-person meal because I asked a question. He sold, he marketed. And I think those are 3 things that if you lead, like you're talking about, if you empower your employees and you lead correctly, it allows you to leave the kitchen and it allows you to go out there and make that impact in the dining room, where guys like yourself do a great job.
Well, yeah, that's the best people to do that are the people that have the most at stake. I'm going to be more genuine, and I'm going to be more interested and involved in customers than anyone. We would teach our team to do that, and our team does a great job of that. But at the end of the day, it is my business and it's my name on the masthead, so to speak. So I need to be able to really dial in and put my money where my mouth is, so to speak.
Last question, and I'll let you dig back into the lunch out there. So on page 24 in this chapter talks about standards. I think that's a huge, so many businesses I've seen don't have it written down what needs to happen, what needs to have a standard of doing something. Like I had a client one time tell me, he's like, Matt, we have a binder in the back. It's got every light bulb in this place and how to order it and where to order it from. And, sometimes you might have to put how to put the light bulb in, depends on what employee it is. But on here on page 24, it says, first, identify the issues in the establishment that need a standard. How do you identify, because there's some things people take for granted, like how to fill a ketchup bottle. But how do you identify what to make standards for and what not?
Well, to be honest with you, I cheat a little bit because all those things come with experience. And so, I've been fortunate enough to, I've been the COO of a restaurant group. I've owned my own restaurants before. I've worked in a lot of these outlets where I've had some of these specific challenges in the past. And essentially what I'm doing for this is I'm copying and pasting. So, I know that if I don't spell out how to wrap a burrito or how to cover a burrito or how many tater tots to put in a bowl, those are all things that I have to have standards for because I have experience with that. The short answer is you have to have a standard for everything. The longer answer is that the less experience you have, the more time it's going to take for you to establish some of those standards, just because it does take experience to really see what needs to be spelled out. The saying that common sense is not so common becomes really applicable when you're dealing with hourly employees that have maybe never worked in food service before. So, that's the short answer is you need a standard for everything. I think the the additional next step for that, and the issue that I see with most people is that they don't always effectively communicate those standards. They think that they've done that, but that's why when I teach a standard or I communicate a standard, I require the team to either show me what I've done for them, or tell me, or all of the above, because unless they show and tell me, I don't know for sure if they've really got it down.
Yeah, and I learned that. I was fortunate at a young age. Back in '99, right out of college, I worked in radio for 4 years. And then at the same time, my dad and my brother and myself opened a boat and RV dealership from scratch, $5,000, little tiny side of the road, a shed, and 3 or 4 boats. Well, it grew to 40 employees, 15 million in sales, and I was in charge of all 45 employees in my mid-20s. No clue what the hell I was doing. The one thing I was good at, though, was I led by example. I did it. Like, I didn't go out and tell a guy how to sweep the parking lot. I would sweep the parking lot. And then I would figure out, okay, why does it work? Why doesn't it work? And then I would teach them and convey the understanding. And that was the hardest part for me as a young entrepreneur back in my 20s, now in my 40s, was realizing I grew up around entrepreneurs. And so a lot of things came to me, I think, naturally easy. And when I had people that were my same age, when I was leading this boat dealership, that I would have to literally spell everything out, it blew me away. But I learned, okay, well, it's easy to make people feel dumb or look dumb when you do that, but you got to figure out a way to communicate it in a manner that they're going to be able to repeat it and do it correctly. And it's definitely something I think a lot of times we take for granted, things that come naturally to us or that are really easy, or like you said, you've done at a high level so many times. Somebody that comes across that is very capable but has never done it, it's not so easy. Right.
And that's why you just have to be patient. You just have to kind of, I hate to say it, but you kind of have to cater to the lowest denominator. You have to really spell things out in a way that is just so crystal clear, that is just monkey proof. You have to be that clear. It may not always come across as clear to them as it does to you. And so that's where you have to be adaptable also, and really adapt your standards and communicate those to what your team needs, not necessarily to what you think they should have.
Yeah, and I think the easy thing to fall back on too is a lot of people tend to blame age groups or generations that they can't do it. And TJ, the gentleman I interviewed, so owns a Which, he made a comment that was really resonated with me. And I understand it because I have a son who's a high school football player and my daughter's a college cheerleader. And he said, Matt, he's like, everybody wants to blame this generation of people. He's like, my kid is on a band, a high school band. There's 300 kids on the band that this one person gets to march in unison all over the place, and they do it perfectly. And he's like, every year, 25% of that audience goes away. He's got seniors graduating, freshmen come in. They don't miss a beat. He's like, so if they're listening to that leader, you've got to think about you and your restaurant. Are you leading like that band director? Are you giving them precise reasons why they have to step this way or do this? A lot of times it comes down to the leadership more than anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree. The buck stops here. You have, if it's your business, you have to take accountability, and you have to really dive in and know the nuts and bolts of everything, so that when those questions arise, you can be that leader, you can be that example, but you can also explain how to overcome those challenges.
Well, I appreciate your time. I've got the book right here. I've already read through it apart. I'm going to finish reading it. I got the worksheets. These won't apply to me from a restaurant standpoint, but I think these can easily be adapted to a lot of businesses. How can people, I guess, obviously find you on your website, ShawnBucher.com, and I've got the link up here, /books, where they can buy the book. Any other way that we can support you in your endeavors with business or the restaurant?
Well, if you're ever in Albuquerque, stop by and have a burrito, abqburrito.com if you want to check out the website for that. I also have a podcast called the Business Chef Podcast. That's businesschef.org if you want to check that out. And then my very first book was the First Timers Cookbook, teaching people how to cook. So that's firsttimerscookbook.com. So yeah, check me out. I'm at Chef Shawn B on most of the social media platforms, but I'd love to connect and answer any questions you might have, or just chat.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your time, and good luck out there. And when I get out to New Mexico, I have a podcast, MPTV, that we travel the country. We're in Utah next week, and Provo and Salt Lake City shooting. So hopefully in the spring and summer, I can make my way out there to the that part of the country and hit up ABQ, have an amazing burrito, and sit down and shake your hand and have a good podcast there as well.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.